Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. I hope you all are well and doing great. So today I'm back with another video to continue our UCAT test preparation. As you guys know, we have already started a decision making questions and we are at the syllogism type. We have completed 16 questions of syllogism and the 5 remaining types we will complete in the next videos. So today, without any further delay, let's continue from our question number 17, which says, none who embrace the downtrodden are guilty of following dogmas. Few who are guilty of following dogmas are truly spiritual. Place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So the first conclusion says, few who are truly spiritual embrace the downtrodden. None who are truly spiritual embrace the downtrodden. Some who are guilty of following dogmas are not truly spiritual. If she is guilty of following dogmas, she does not embrace the downtrodden. And anyone who is truly spiritual and is guilty of following dogmas would embrace the downtrodden. So here we have these fine conclusions. So let's see which one does follow the statement of the question and which one does not. So here we have first conclusion, which says, few who are truly spiritual embrace the downtrodden. It does not follow, because we cannot say with certainty that some of the truly spiritual people embrace the downtrodden, since there is no overlap between those who embrace the downtrodden and those who are guilty of following dogmas. So because of this reason, we have the first conclusion which does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it in front of this conclusion. Next we have our second conclusion, which says, none who are truly spiritual embrace the downtrodden. It does not follow, because we cannot say with certainty whether any of the truly spiritual people embrace the downtrodden or not. So this conclusion does not follow. So again we will drop a no in front of this conclusion. Next we have a third conclusion. It does follow, because the second statement states that few who are guilty of following dogmas are truly spiritual. So that's why the third conclusion does follow. So we'll drag a yes and drop it here. Fourth conclusion, which says, if she is guilty of following dogmas, she does not embrace the downtrodden. This one does follow from the first statement. There is no overlap between those who embrace the downtrodden and those who are guilty of following dogmas. So that's why the fourth conclusion does follow, and we will drop a yes in front of it. Fifth conclusion does not follow because the first statement states that there is no overlap between those who embrace the downtrodden and those who are guilty of following dogmas. So the fifth conclusion does not follow the statement of the question, so we will drag a no and drop it here. So let's move towards our next question, which says a few questions in the test were based on extended thinking only. The rest of the questions in the test were based solely on understanding or solely on application. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So here we have our first conclusion, that none of the questions in the test were based on recalling facts. Second, not all questions in the test were based on understanding or application. Then we have at least one question that was based on extended thinking, was not based on understanding. All the questions in the test were based on extended thinking or understanding or application. A few questions based on application were also based on extended thinking and application. So here we have these 5 conclusions. So let's see which one does follow. So the first conclusion, which says none of the questions in the test were based on recalling facts. It does follow because all questions were based on extended thinking, understanding, or application. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Second conclusion, which says not all questions in the test were based on understanding or application. It does follow because a few questions were based on extended thinking. So again we have to drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Then third we have it does follow from both the statements that are given above. So again it's a yes, so we will drop here a yes. Fourth conclusion, which says all the questions in the test were based on extended thinking alone, some on understanding alone, and the rest on application alone. So this one does follow. So again we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion like this. You can also place this one here and this one here. Okay, now we have the last conclusion of all. It does not follow because based on both the statements, we know that none of the questions overlapped in terms of what they were based on. So this one does not follow, that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Okay, next question is question number 19, which says the entire cost of this project apart from the land acquisition was borne by federal authorities. Federal authorities bear the cost of large infrastructure projects only. Place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So first conclusion we have that this was a large infrastructure project. Second we have any development costs were borne by the federal authorities. Then we have federal authorities bear all costs of large infrastructure projects. The land acquisition cost was borne by public-private partnership. Not all costs of large infrastructure projects are borne by federal authorities. So the first conclusion that it does follow because its costs were borne by federal authorities and they bear the costs for large infrastructure projects only. So that's why it does follow and we will drag a yes and drop it here. Second conclusion, which says any development costs were borne by the federal authorities, does follow because all costs except the acquisition costs were borne by federal authorities, which means that any development costs were also borne by the federal authorities. So it means the second conclusion does follow, so we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Third conclusion that says federal authorities bear all costs of large infrastructure projects. It does not follow because the first statement states that The cost of land acquisition was not borne by federal authorities. So this is the reason because of which third conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it in front of this box. Then we have this conclusion, the fourth one. It does not follow because we have no information about this. So again, it's a no, so we will drop a no in front of this conclusion. The fifth conclusion, which says not all costs of large infrastructure projects are borne by federal authorities, it does follow from the first statement alone. So we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. So let's move towards our next question, which says moms, plodders, nisons and coupons are type of fish. All moms are plodders. No plodder is a nison. Both plodders and nisons are coupons. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So first conclusion we have that if a fish is a mom, it is a coupon. Second, no nison is a mom. If an animal is a plodder, it is not a mom. No coupons are moms. If a fish is a plodder but not a mom, it is a coupon. So let's see which one does follow the statement of the question and which one does not. So here we have our first conclusion, which is if a fish is a mom, it is a coupon. It does follow because all moms are plodders and plodders are coupons. So because of this, this one does follow and we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Next we have that no nison is a mom. This one does follow because all moms are plodders and no plodders are nisons. Therefore, no nison is a mom. So again, second conclusion does follow. So we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Then we have a third conclusion. If an animal is a plodder, it is not a mom. This one does not follow because all moms are polluters. So we will drag a no and drop it in front of this conclusion. So the fourth conclusion says that no coupons are moms. This conclusion does not follow because all moms are polluters and polluters are coupons. So this one again does not follow, so we will drag a no and drop it in front of this conclusion. The last conclusion does follow because polluters are coupons. That's why this one does follow the statement. The information in the question can be visualized as a Venn diagram. So here we have the mom, and then here license, and you can say here polluters, and then coupons. Like this, you can take a look at this Venn diagram. So the fifth conclusion does follow. That's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Okay, so now let's move towards our next question. All of the animals on the green wallpaper were white except for the 5 of the teddy bears, which were brown. So place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So any pictures of horses on the wallpaper were colored white. Some of the cows on the wallpaper were colored green. All of the white animals shown on the wallpaper were farm animals. There was at least one teddy bear on the wallpaper that was white. All animals shown on the wallpaper that were not white were brown. So the first conclusion, it does follow because if there were horses, they must have been white since all of the animals were white except for 5 of the teddy bears. And horses are not teddy bears. So that's why the first conclusion does follow. So we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Some of the cows on the wallpaper were color green. This one does not follow because green is the color of the wallpaper and all of the animals were white except for 5 of the teddy bears. So this one does not follow, so we will drop a no in front of it. Third conclusion says that all of the white animals shown on the wallpaper were farm animals. It does not follow because the only named animals are teddy bears, which are toys and not farm animals. As no other animals are named, we cannot say whether they were farm animals. So, the third conclusion again does not follow. Sorry, so we will drag a no in front of it. There were at least one teddy bear on the wallpaper that was white. So it does follow because 5 of the teddy bears which were brown implies that not all of the teddy bears were brown. So at least one teddy bear must have been white. So this does follow, so we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of it. The fifth conclusion, which says all animals shown on the wallpaper that were not white were brown. This one does follow because the statement says that all animals were white except for 5 brown teddy bears. So the fifth conclusion, it will drag it away so we can again put it like this. So the fifth conclusion does follow, that's why we will again drag a yes and drop it here in front of it like this. So now let's move towards our next question that says beach games used only beach balls or rounder balls, most of which were brown. All of the beach balls were red except for some of the small ones that were yellow. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So here we have first conclusion which says a beach game played with a yellow ball must have used a small beach ball. Second, a small beach ball that was not yellow must have been red. A beach game played with a ball that was not brown must have used a beach ball. A red beach ball was not one of the small ones. All of the brown balls were rounder balls. So let's see which one does follow and which one does not. So here we have our first conclusion. It does not follow because some of the rounder balls, which were the only other balls used in the beach game, were brown. We are not told what colors the remainder of the rounder balls were. some may have been yellow. So that's why we have the first conclusion which does not follow the statement of the question. So we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next we have a second conclusion which says a small beach ball that was not yellow must have been red. This one does follow because the second sentence says all of the beach balls were red except for some which were yellow. So we will drop a yes in front of this conclusion. Third conclusion does not follow because some of the rounders ball were not brown. So this is the reason because of which the third conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it in front of this. So here is the fourth conclusion, which is a red beach ball was not one of the small ones. So this one is the fourth conclusion. It does not follow because those small beach balls that were not yellow were red. So that's why we again drag a no and drop it here in front of it. Next we have the last conclusion which says all of the brown balls were rounder balls. And it does follow because all of the beach balls were either red or yellow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Okay, next question we have, that is question number 23. It says there were only men and women in the room. All of the men and some of the women in the room wore jackets. And half of the men wore white shirts, but the rest of the men wore blue shirts. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So the first conclusion says that any person in the room who did not wear a jacket must have been a woman. Second one, that a person wearing a blue shirt must also have worn a jacket. A greater number of people in the room wore a jacket than did not wear a jacket. There were more blue shirts in the room than white shirts. Any woman wearing a jacket must have worn a blue shirt. So now we have these 5 conclusions. So let's see which one does follow and which one does not. So the first conclusion, it does follow because the first sentence says that all of the men wore a jacket. So It means it does follow, so we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Second, a person wearing blue shirt must also have worn a jacket. It does follow because the second sentence says that all the women who did not wear a jacket had a white shirt. As all the men wore jackets and half of the men wore blue shirts, anyone wearing a blue shirt must have worn a jacket. So it means because of this reason we have the second conclusion does follow the statement. So we will again drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next we have a third conclusion. A greater number of people in the room wore a jacket that did not wear a jacket. So it does not follow because there is no indication of how many women were in the room or how many of those women wore jackets. So this one does not follow, and that's why we will so the fourth conclusion does not follow, so we will again drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next we have our fifth conclusion. Any woman wearing a jacket must have worn a blue shirt. This conclusion does not follow because the second sentence says the rest of the men who did not wear white shirts wore blue shirts, but it does not say what color shirts women who wore jackets wore. They may have been blue, but they may have been a different colors. So because of this reason, it does not follow. So that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next question we have. Golfers are required to wear trousers while playing a round of golf. However, female members may wear skirts and juniors may wear shorts throughout the game provided they started to play in the morning session. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. The first conclusion says any golfer wearing a skirt or shorts must have started to play during the morning session. Second, any golfer wearing trousers in an afternoon session must be male. Golfers wearing shorts and who start playing during a morning session are required to change into trousers if the game lasts into the afternoon. That any person wearing trousers who starts playing during the morning session must be male. And the last conclusion, Any person who wears shorts or a skirt while playing in the afternoon session must have started playing during the morning session. So let's see which conclusion does follow and which one does not. So the first conclusion, it does follow because female members may wear skirts and juniors may wear shorts only if they start play during morning sessions. So any player starting in the afternoon is required to wear trousers. That's why the first conclusion does follow the statement, and we will drag a yes in front of this conclusion like this. And now we have second conclusion, which says any golfer wearing trousers in an afternoon session must be male. It does not follow because players have an option when starting to play in morning sessions, but do not have that option if they start to play in the afternoon. So that's why we have this conclusion does not follow, and we will drag a no and drop it here. Next we have a third conclusion that golfers wearing shorts who start playing during our morning sessions are required to change into trousers if the game lasts in the afternoon. So this conclusion does not follow because the second sentence says that they can wear these clothes throughout the game. It means this one is not related to the paragraph, so we will drop a no in front of it. Fourth conclusion does not follow because female members and juniors can wear trousers if they wish, but it's not mandatory. So a person wearing trousers could be female. So again, the fourth conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Then we have the last but not least conclusion, which says that it does follow because all golfers starting to play in the afternoon must wear trousers. So someone wearing shorts or a skirt must have started to play during the morning session. So that's why the fifth conclusion does follow, and then we will drag a yes in front of this conclusion. Next question is question number 25, which says that most of the cars in the car park just had electric engines, but some of the others were hybrid vehicles, while there were a few petrol engine cars and a small number of diesel engine cars. All of the cars that only had electric engines were red. but most of the hybrid cars were white, while those cars that were neither red nor white were green. So place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So first conclusion we have that there were more diesel and petrol cars in the car park than there were red cars. Second, there were more petrol cars than diesel cars in the car park. Third one says there were more green cars than white cars in the car park. A green car that had an electric engine must have been a hybrid car. A diesel engine car that was neither white nor green must have been red. So the first conclusion, it does not follow, because statement 1 says that most of the cars had only electric engines, all of which, according to statement 2, were red. Statement 1 says there were only a few petrol and a small number of diesels. This clearly implies that there were more red cars. So because of this whole reason, this conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion, like this. Second conclusion, that there were more petrol cars than diesel cars in the car parks. This conclusion does follow, because statement 1 says there were a few petrol cars and even few petrol cars and few diesel cars. So this means the second conclusion does follow. So we will drop a yes in front of it. Then we have a third conclusion, does not follow, because statement 2 says that most of the hybrids were white, but does not say how many white hybrid cars there were. We know that none of the electric, diesel or petrol cars were white. The green cars consisted of some of the hybrids and all of the petrol and all of the diesel. We do not have enough information to determine whether the number of this combination of cars was greater or smaller than the number of white cars. So here we have the third conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no in front of this conclusion. So let's move towards our fourth conclusion, which says it does follow, because all of the electric cars were red, while the other types of car were either green or white. So it does follow, and that's why we will drag a yes in front of this conclusion. Fifth conclusion does follow because all the cars were red, white, or green. So this statement does follow, and we will again drag a yes and drop it here. Next question, that is question number 26. It says all of the vehicles in the yard had either 2 or 3 wheels. All of the two-wheeled scooters were black, but some of the two-wheeled cycles that were not black were blue. So place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. Any green scooter in the yard must have had 3 wheels. The only black vehicles in the yard were scooters. If a cycle was red, it must have had 2 wheels. All of the two-wheeled vehicles were either black or blue. There were at least 3 different colors of vehicles in the yard. So the first conclusion, it does follow because statement 1 says that there were 2 and 3 wheeled vehicles, and statement 2 says that all the two-wheeled scooters were black. So any green scooter must have 3 wheels. So it means the first conclusion does follow. So we will drag a yes and drop it here. The second conclusion, it does not follow because statement 1 says some of the vehicles were black, and although we know that all two-wheeled scooters it does not say that only two-wheeled scooters were black. So the second conclusion does not follow, so that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. The third conclusion, that if a cycle was red, it must have had 2 wheels. It does not follow because statement 1 says there were 2 and 3 wheeled vehicles in the yard, and statement 2 says that some of the two-wheeled cycles were blue. So it is possible that a red cycle may have had 2 wheels or 3 wheels. So according to this, the third conclusion does not follow. So we will again drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. The third conclusion, it does not follow because statement 1 says there were 2 and 3 wheeled vehicles in the yard, and statement 2 says that some of the two-wheeled vehicles were blue. So it is possible that a red cycle may have had 2 wheels or 3 wheels. So this conclusion does not follow. So again we will drag a no and drop it here. So the last conclusion does follow because we know that some of the two-wheeled cycles were blue and some of the rest were neither blue nor black. So it does follow, so it means we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next question says that in public life their leader is a winner. Anyone who is a winner in public life is either disengaged with family or with their inner self. Their leader is disengaged with family. This one does not follow because their leader could be either disengaged with family or their inner self. So we will drop a no in front of this conclusion. Second statement, that no one who is disengaged with family is also disengaged with their inner self. This one does not follow because this is true only for a person who is a winner in public life, but not necessarily for all people. This conclusion does not follow. Again, we will drag a no and drop it here. Third conclusion, that says in public life, if the leader is engaged with family, they are not engaged with their inner self. It does follow because their leader is a winner in public life, and a winner in public life is either disengaged with family or their inner self. So, if the leader is engaged with family, then they must not be engaged with their inner self. So this does follow, and we will drag a yes and drop it here. Fourth conclusion, which says any leader who is a winner in public life is either disengaged with family or their inner self. This one does follow since the second statement is true for all people who are winners in public life, which includes all leaders who are winners in public life. So this one does follow, and we will drag a yes. The fifth conclusion, which says someone who is disengaged with their inner self and a winner in public life is engaged with family. It does follow from the second statement alone. So again, we will drop a yes in front of this conclusion. You can also drag it like this if you cannot drag it the whole. Next question, that is question number 28. All the paint came in small or large pots except for blue, which was the only available in small pots. The only colors besides blue were red and green. Altogether, there were more red than blue pots, but not as many as green. So place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. There were more small pots of red paint than small pots of green paint. The first conclusion, it does not follow. We know that overall there are more green pots than red pots, but we do not know how many of each were large and how many were small. So this one does not follow, and that's why we will drag a no in front of this conclusion. Like this. Second conclusion, that only large pots of paint were either red or green. It does follow because there were only 3 colors of paint, and all the blue paint came in small pots. So all the large pots must be either green or red. So this one does follow, that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. The third conclusion, there were more small pots of paints than there were. So third conclusion does follow, that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. The fourth conclusion that says there were more large red pots than small blue pots, it does not follow, because bullet 2 says there were more red pots than blue, but it does not indicate how many of the red pots were small. It is possible that there were more blue pots than large red pots, but this cannot be confirmed. So again, it does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. And the last one we have that there were more green pots than there were red pots. It does follow because bullet 2 says there were more red than blue, but not as many as green. So it does follow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Drag it and drop it here. So this is all we have for today. I hope you guys understand. If you still have any confusion, you can tell me in the comment section. I'll be back with another video. Till then, just take care and goodbye.